YouTube? This is Dean with Board Game Social. I'm here today to talk about a game that came out at Gen Con and just recently hit mass distribution, and that is the Village Crone from Fireside Games. The Village Crone is a 1 to 6 player game that allows you to take on the role of a witch, or a crone as they were called back in those days, where you're casting spells on the villagers, trying to get them to either fall in love or turning them into toads. That's the theme. In its essence, it's a worker placement, resource management style game. So with that being said, let's take a look at it, see how it plays, and then we'll come back for some parting thoughts.
Okay, first things first, the components of the games, you've got 6 tile modular boards that you can lay out in any form or fashion. You can do it as a rectangle, you can do it as different shapes to make the game a little harder, so they're a little offset. You've got standees, cardboard standees for each of the villagers. You got a farmer, blacksmith, priest, etc. You got 6 of those. You've got cardboard tokens for your familiars, and you've got some cards, some scheme cards as they call them, that you're trying to complete in order to gain those points. First player to get to 13 is going to be the winner of the game. So component-wise, yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's nothing. There's no minis in it, but the game doesn't really require any minis. To be honest, it just being the type of worker placement, resource style of game that it is. Okay, so to start the game, each player is going to choose their witch. Basically, what type of familiar do you want? Each witch has its own familiar. This one here, Beatrix, she has the rat familiar, so that's the familiar you're going to play. And there's 6 different ones. Now, they are all the same as far as their spell book. The only difference is that the familiar that they control. And the familiars don't have any special powers either. They're all virtually the same. It's just a different token. So, yeah, it is what it is. So once you figure that out, you're going to get, each person's going to get 3 scheme cards, a level 1, level 2, level 3. You're going to then kind of determine, after looking at those, where you want your familiars to start. You're going to start with 2 of them out on the board, or actually 3 of them out on the board, 2 in a location where you can gather resources, 1 here in the village green. You can add familiars as the game goes on by casting some spells to give you more, but your familiars are going to be the items that are going to, they're your workers. All right, they're the ones that are going to be gathering the resources for you. So you have different types of resources. You have fire, soil, flour, silver. Those resources are going to be used in combination to cast spells. At the beginning of every turn, you are going to give a tithe to the tithe barn because you're a good member of the community. So you take one of your resources and you put it in there. You then get to move either your familiar or a villager. You can move any combination of them. The only stipulation is that it is a total of max of 6 spaces. So you can move your familiar 3, a villager 3. You can move each of them 1. Doesn't matter. 6 is the limit, however you decide to use them. You can cast spells at any time during your turn. You can do it before you move. You can do it in the middle of a move. So depending on how you're going to, what schemes you're going for, will determine kind of when you want to cast your spells. When you are done with your move and you're done with casting your spells, you are then going to pass it over to the next player, and they will repeat the same action. All right, so you see here you have the different scheme cards. The higher the point value, the harder it should be to complete. And you'll see a couple different symbols here. You have the circle. That is a passive trait, meaning you don't have to be the one to activate that in order to gain the points. So for this one, if during the course of the game, if someone else transforms the blacksmith into a frog, you can collect this 1 point because you have that card. If it's a solid diamond, that is something that you must perform yourself in order to trigger it and to get those points. So summon the priest to the mill. You have to do that. Transform the priest into a frog. You have to do that. If someone else does it for you, it doesn't count. You have to be the one to trigger that. So during the course of the game, you're going to complete these, and the first person to get to 13 points is going to be the winner of the game. Movement, you can move a total of 6 spaces during your turn. It can be all one person moving. It can be a combination of a familiar, a villager. It doesn't matter, just 6 is the maximum amount. You can cast spells at any point in time during your turn. It could be at the beginning, it could be in the middle of a movement, it could be at the end. It doesn't matter. It's however you want to play it, depending on the cards that you have, obviously. You do not collect your new resources until the end of the turn, and that's after everyone has gone. So it's kind of important how you manage those resources, because during the course of someone else's turn, you could cast a spell if you have resources to do that. It's going to cost you 1 silver to be able to do it, but you could do it. And after playing this a couple times, I really think that is almost the heart of the game, because there are going to be opportunities as people are moving stuff around that are going to meet some of your cards, which then you can use to cast a spell. But you need to make sure you have that silver in reserve to do it. You can also do things, perhaps, if you think that maybe your opponent is trying to get the Lord over here. You can cast a spell to turn them into a frog. That'll prevent them from meeting their needs. So having that gold in reserve, or having that silver in reserve, I should say, to be able to cast spells during your opponent's turns is really crucial to not only winning the game, but also to the theme of the game and the social interaction involved with it. It's really a pretty straightforward game. I mean, it's a worker placement, resource management game. Yes, there's spell casting in it, which allows you to do some, to a little bit of take that mechanic with those spell casting, but it's mainly designed so that you can get your points to win the game. I really wish that the different witches were a little more asymmetrical, having different spells, or at least maybe one of them being better at casting the love spell, so maybe it doesn't cost them as much resources, but they are all the same, which is very typical of a Euro style game. They really don't want to make it too I wouldn't say uneven, but they like everything being exactly balanced and fair, so it really just comes down to min-maxing your moves and your resource management. So it definitely does not have that asymmetrical value to it. As far as the solitaire play, it does play one player. When you play one player, what you do is you reduce all the resources in each spot down to 10 resources only. And your goal then is you have to get your 13 points before you run out of 2 of those resources. It's okay. I mean, it can be challenging, but as far as solitaire games go, there's much better solitaire games out there to play than this version. This is definitely a much better 3-player game, I think, is its sweet spot. 2-player, not quite as much of the worrying about what your opponent's doing. So 3-player would be good, 4-player is okay. After that, the time sort of drags on and you kind of wish it was over. But it's a solid game. It definitely is a game that, especially in October, I think it will get some play because it has that Halloween-y sort of feel to it. Okay, so what are some of the spells that are available in this game? I know you're asking, so let me again give you a rundown here. You can do a conjuring spell, meaning you can create more familiars for yourself to put out on the board. So you can cast a spell, put another familiar out. Remember, your familiars are your workers, so they're the ones who are going to gather the resources for you. So the more workers you have, more familiars, the more you're going to get. You can cast a love spell. So you can say the peasant and the priest are in love. So, then don't tell father. So you cast a spell, so you put a little heart on them, so they're now bound together. So whatever happens to one happens to the other. So if they get changed into a frog, or one gets changed into a frog, they both get changed into frogs. If one gets summoned somewhere, they both get summoned somewhere. You can cast another love spell later on, or someone else can. It'll remove it and make them fall in love with someone else. You can do a summoning spell, meaning you can move any one villager or a familiar to another location. So maybe you want to have the miller come down to the farm, or maybe you want to move someone else's familiar somewhere else. You can do the same thing with switching. You can have people switch locations, or you can switch familiars and locations. It's a great way to really kind of stick it in the back of your opponents to prevent them from getting some resources that they need. You can do a transformation, meaning you can turn a villager into a frog. And so when that happens, you take that off and you put a frog down. Sometimes you'll need to do this yourself to complete a scheme. Sometimes if you think someone's has to do it for their own schemes, you can do it and kind of screw them over, because now it won't count for them. They have to do it themselves. Anything that's a frog can't be moved. The only way a frog can be moved is if you have a familiar in that spot, and the familiar can carry it somewhere if you need to do that. You can do a fortune spell, meaning cast a spell. You can take any 3 cards out of the tithe building. You can do a binding spell. Do a binding spell, you put it down. That means no one can come in, no one can leave. The only way to get rid of this is do another binding spell, so you can lock down a location. You still get your ingredients out of it, but it does prevent people from coming or going, so makes them burn spells too and ingredients to get rid of it. And then finally, you can do a protection spell, protecting yourself. Says block any spell by another witch before he or she takes an action. So those are the spells. Now, here's the goofy part, or the thematic part, however you want to think of it. And that is, the rules say when you do these spells, you must read the incantation provided in your spell book, or it doesn't count. So if you're into that sort of thing, you'll have no problems with it. If you don't like doing that sort of thing in front of other people, especially if you're playing with strangers, you may not get into it a whole lot. So, for example, for conjuring, for feed and greed, for wanton need, stalk with me, you cursed breed. Summoning, by beast that flies and beast that crawls, appear at once within these walls. So on and so forth. Now, if you're against witchcraft and spell casting and that sort of thing, I understand that. It is a game. I don't think anything's really going to happen. But if you are against it for religious or moral reasons, you, I'm sure, can house rule it and not use it. It also says you can come up with your own incantations if you choose to. So if you're really creative, I suppose go for that as well. It's kind of forcing you to do it, but it is thematic, and for the style of game it is. But if you don't do it, it's not going to make or break it. So anyways, those are the spells. Those are the witches that you have. Again, I wish they were a little more asymmetrical, meaning, with one witch being better at casting one type of spell, maybe for lesser ingredients than others, but it's not, so whatever. It's typical Euro game in that fashion. They want to keep everything very balanced, and no chance for someone to say that it's, one witch has an advantage over another. Okay, so that's the Village Crone from Fireside Games. 1 to 6 players, ages 13 and up. Definitely don't think you need to be 13 to play it. It's not that difficult of a game. Maybe they did it because of the theme. But overall, it's a solid game. All right, everyone says, oh, you have to have a scale. You have to have a scale if you're going to do reviews. So here it is. Since we're Board Game Social and we're all about that ice cream, I'm going to give it a solid 2 dips. 2 dips of your choice. It could be something exotic like black raspberry chip, or it could just be moose tracks. But 2 dips of ice cream is what I'll give this game. So a nice solid middle of the road 5 or 6 on a 10-point scale is where it would fall. So I really hope you enjoyed the review. Check out the game. You might enjoy it. I enjoyed it. It's fun. I just don't know if it's going to get past the if it's that niche holiday Halloween sort of, hey, let's pull it out and play it. So anyways, if you enjoyed the review, please subscribe to the channel. Check us out on Facebook at Board Game Social, and follow me on Twitter at Dean Liggett. Until the next time, I'll see you at the next social event. Take care, everybody.